Welcome, Canada. My name is James Golinveaux. I'm the President and CEO of Viking, and I'm excited to have you here in our symposium today. You've got some very talented speakers talking about some important topics and important technologies today over the next couple of hours. You've got Bob Coonts, who's going to talk to you about Viking foam and some exciting new advancements that we've made, specifically in the high X foam and generators. You're going to have Joe Donato talking about special hazards and some new design manager software programs that I think are second to none in the industry. You got Darren Palmieri talking about CPVC residential. It's going to be kind of an exciting update to what's going on, especially on the coin sprinklers, interstitial spaces, and residential technology. You got Shaun Kramer coming up with Viking storage and some new information on K28 and the FM systems about ceiling heights over 45 feet. So I'm excited that you're here, excited that you're spending time with us. And these are very talented speakers on the technical part. Mike Bosma, obviously, in charge of our Canadian operations, will be speaking to you, and Scott Tanner as well to finish out the program. So on behalf of myself and on behalf of all the Viking employees, thank you for being here, and I hope you really enjoy the next couple of hours.
Hey, good day and welcome. My name is Mike Bosma. I'm Executive Vice President for Viking Corporation, and I'm responsible for sales outside the USA, and that includes, in this case, Canada. As you probably know, SupplyNet has its 36 locations across North America, and Canada is a very important part of that. Canada and a few select distribution partners service that region, and we're very happy to be able to bring you some of the leverage products and services that we offer around the globe. You're going to hear a unique brand of speakers. You heard James just talk about some of those, some of the product lines that have allowed Viking to expand their water-based product line with special hazards, with clean agents, with some expanded use of CPVC. Viking's always pushing the edge. We're 100% committed to water-based fire protection and fire suppression. And we're expanding those products and hopefully giving you and all your compadres up north all the tools you need to continue to grow your business. So you'll see a lot of unique things. You'll see some of the specialty things. We appreciate you coming. You'll hear from Scott at the end of this program, but we really appreciate the time you're giving us, and we think it'll very much be worth your while. So again, we thank you, and we'll look forward to this program. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome to our Canada Fire Protection Symposium. Our first presenter today is Robert Coonts. He is the product manager for foam and special hazards for the Viking Group. Robert began his career in 1981 as an installer for fire protection in Denver, Colorado. From there, he moved into design by 1984. That eventually led Robert to starting his own successful company. That led him to his own successful company that he eventually sold. Robert has 37 years experience in the fire protection industry and has incorporated this into his product manager position. This knowledge of contracting and design has made him a great resource for contractors, engineers, and architects. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, thanks everybody, and Hope it's as nice in Canada as it is here in Colorado today. Sounds like you guys have some cold weather moving in as well as we do. So anyway, I just want to go over today all the foam products that we have, some of the new products that we've launched. Just literally Wednesday, we launched our high expansion foam systems. And so we'll go over that just a little bit today. And, you know, if you guys want to set up a lunch and learn down the road, please contact Scott Tanner and we'll get it all set up and go over the entire foam product line that we have. Anyway, I'm going to get started here a little bit, and we'll start out with the high expansion foam generators. So again, these were introduced Wednesday. The one that you see here is our single. So this would be equivalent to a JetX 15, for instance. We have a double that just pairs up with this one. Really, it's just two of them put together. Would be this equal the JetX 20 or the JetX 27. The nice thing about our generators, one, they're very lightweight. Our single weighs about 153 pounds. Our double weighs 330 pounds. So very lightweight, very efficient generators. No moving parts whatsoever, which makes it very nice. No very low maintenance. What's nice, it's two parts. It's this body and then the manifold on the back, which is kind of hard to see here. But there's four nozzles on the back here that spray the solution onto the perforated metal screen here and creates the high expansion foam. One real quick thing about our high expansion foam, it's a 3% foam. So it does take a little bit more, but we've made up for that cost in the cost of our generators. We're very priced very well in the market, and we've been very competitive with anybody out there. So that's our high X, and I'm sure you guys have seen some literature come out in the last 2 days on it. And again, any of this that you have questions on, please contact Scott Tanner or myself. There'll be a slide at the end here that'll go through that. For the oil and gas type stuff, we have the foam makers for the dike protection with the pores. We have the foam chambers as well. All the different kind of foams, the 1 and 3% AFFF, 3% alcohol resistant AFFF. We do have a 3% fluoroprotein as well, and then a 3% mil spec. So I don't know that you guys would use that a whole lot, but all of our foams are UL/FM approved, so that's awesome. And then of course our 3% high expansion foam. We also have the foam packs or the foam pumps. These are made by a company called Fire Lion in Portland, Oregon. These are very customizable. So you're seeing a double here. We can make it a triple. You can have two singles on a skid if you wanted to do that, but you can have electric, diesel, diesel, whatever you want, whatever configuration you want, they will make it for us. So once you get into a triple pump, these controllers would come off and set onto the pump room itself, the floor. So then we get into the foam tanks. So our bladder tanks, horizontal or vertical, either one. The nicest thing about our foam tanks are the openings on the ends here. Our openings are huge. I mean, it makes it much easier to get the bladder in and out if you have to do that. I actually have a picture of a small Italian guy in Italy crawling out of our horizontal tank. That tells you how big the opening is. But these are all made by a company that we own called KCA. KCA is in Italy. All of our tanks, foam chambers, foam makers, and monitors and flanged ratio controllers are all made by KCA in Italy. So we do stock all of this in the US, and as we grow it in Canada, we will continue to stock it up there as well. So a big thing to remember, we have the horizontal and the vertical. We also have the stainless steel horizontal bladder tank. So for offshore type stuff, any corrosive areas, we can get that bladder tank in stainless steel as well. The atmospheric tanks that we have both the single and double wall. Double wall being our largest seller, just because you don't have to have any other kind of containment, no diked area, no other containment tank itself. These tanks are custom made by a company called Poly Processing. So you would give them what you want. If you want a ladder, a sight glass, where you want the vent located, the outlets located, all that. They would then do an engineered drawing, dimensioned with all the outlets, everything, send it back to you. You would approve it, and then they would make that tank. It's about a 6 to 8 week process, just depending on how busy they are. So another awesome product there for us. The great nozzle system for the big hangers. This is a trench nozzle, no moving parts. Viking is very big on no moving parts. It just makes it so much easier for the end user, less maintenance, all that. So these nozzles will go in the trench. All the piping runs in the trench as well. And it's really, it's a very low spray pattern. So that spray pattern really never gets above 18 inches above the floor, and puts down about 1.5 inch to 2 inch foam blanket across the entire hangar floor there. So these have been around for about 20 some years now, 22 years, something like that. And we use these quite a bit. And then so we liked that nozzle so well that we created a helideck nozzle for all the helidecks out there. And so this particular one that you would see would go into the center part of the deck. To be honest with you, if it's a 40-foot deck, one nozzle could cover that, but no one ever likes to do just that one nozzle, just in case the chopper ever happened to crash onto that. You'd have no fire protection. So we usually see 2 of these in the middle, and then depending on size of the deck, we would have just the nozzle itself supported by the pipe on the outside of the gutter system or up through the gutter system, and that would spray onto the deck itself. These cover the helidecks in about 30 seconds. It's incredible. Nice thick foam layer across there. And again, with the spray pattern being so close to the deck, the wind really doesn't affect it like it does a lot of the other nozzles on the market there. So we're pretty excited about this. We've done quite a few helidecks now, and again, if we set up a lunch and learn with you, I'll go through all the different videos so you can see all the spray patterns and all that of these. So moving on, our monitors. So we just came out with these monitors about a month and a half, 2 months ago. Again, these are made by KCA in Italy, Viking owned company. You can get it the manual monitor, or you can get it with the oscillating base. These are all UL approved monitors, so you can get the different nozzles, all that kind of stuff on there as well. To back up real quick, our foam makers are the only FM approved foam makers on the market. So that's a pretty big deal, because we're finding more and more of these locations are FM insured, so it works out very well. Kind of get into our proportioners, ratio controllers. So our initial one was the grooved one. Every outlet on it's grooved, so really no between flanges type thing there, and works out very well. We thought it was pretty awesome. I thought it was pretty awesome, and right up until I went and met some industrial contractors down in Houston, Texas, who told me it was a really nice looking deal, but they couldn't use it. So we said, why can't you use it? Everything's got to be flanged on these refineries and chemical plants. And so we went back to the drawing board and created the flange by thread proportioner. So the grooved one is made in Hastings, Michigan. The flange thread is made in Italy by KCA, and this is nickel aluminum bronze, so very corrosive resistant, which makes it very nice for outdoor applications. So we have that, and then we just came up with our wide range proportioner, 6 and 8 inch. They both start at 50 GPM. The 6 inch goes up to 1800 GPM. The 8 inch goes up to 3000 GPM. So pretty awesome product there as well. We also have the ILBPs, inline balance pressure proportioners. So when you're using the foam packs or the foam pumps, you'll be using these as well. We used to use these quite a bit in what we called our low flow foam systems. It just made it much easier to, when you got down to that, you had to prove that you were getting your 3%, 3 or 3 to 3.9% mix on the forehead minimum or forehead maximum there, calc, that it worked very well for that. But now we have the wide range, so we've just really see these on the pump systems, so it works out very well. The eductors, I don't know that you guys will ever use these. They're not a listed or approved product, but the Department of Defense in the U.S., that's all they use on their products or their hangers. And it's an interesting product. It works very well as long as you put it where you say you're going to use it and you get it in your calcs the right way. As long as you maintain that 5 pipe diameters before and after it, it's pretty awesome. You do lose about 35% of your pressure through it, so that's kind of a big loss. And you can't put it any higher than 26 feet above the ground. So it can go vertically or horizontally, either one. But what happens as the water passes through and past these tubes, creates a vacuum with these tubes, and then sucks the foam out of an atmospheric tank right into here, mixes with the water, and goes out as the foam water solution. So it's been an awesome product. We've sold it for years. It's made by a company called Foam Tech in Sweden, and again, it's a custom item. So when you order it, it's custom made for that particular job. So if you ever do use it, keep that in mind, along with the pressure loss as well. So some of the other products that we have, I'm sure you are all familiar with Fireflex. Fireflex has been a partner with Viking for about 27, 28 years now, and they just do a phenomenal job. I mean, everything they make is just outstanding. And so this is their ICAF system, compressed air foam. It's pretty awesome. It uses about 4 times less water and 6 times less foam than a conventional foam system. So you would have the compressed air tanks here in the back, all the valvings inside the cabinet here. This would be your stainless steel foam tank. It mixes together here and goes out as a very thick, rich foam. It's like a shaving cream, actually. It will stick to any surface there is. And what's nice with it using so much less water, it's great for more remote areas, that type of stuff. And you can also get this all on a skid with its own water tank. So if your site has no water, you can add a water tank to the skid and you're set and ready to go. So it works out very, very well for transformers, small hangers, truck and rail rack load racks, all that type of stuff. Wind turbines, it's a big deal on that now too, and they have just done a great job with this. So we're pretty happy to have them as a partner as always. So another product that we have for remote areas is a product called Protecto Burn. So this is this tank would drop to the site. You would fill it with water, foam, and then it has an inert gas added to the tank as well. The pressure, the initial pressure on this tank, the static pressure is about 300 psi. There's no underground required to this whatsoever. You can run monitors off of it. You can run sprinklers, the big nozzles for the rail and truck load racks. You name it, you can run it off here. It becomes a self-expanding foam. So 1,000-gallon tank like this creates 10,000 gallons of finished foam when it's done. And again, so for remote areas, just like the ICAF system, it just works phenomenal. I mean, it's just outstanding. So no underground to any of it. And we've got a lot of videos that they've used both the AFFF foams. They can also use a fluorine-free foam with it. What makes it nice is if you have a product or project now, and you want to use AFFF now, and then down the road you want to switch when fluorine free comes out, there's nothing to change out. Everything stays the same. So another great product there as well. So all these foam products, Viking is so good at creating new products all the time. We have new valves coming out and everything. You'll see a lot of that during the breaks between the speakers and all that. But just a great lineup of foam. You'll see later on in here, great lineup of clean agent products as well, residential products, storage products, you name it. So, but again, anything with design, we did create a program, and I should have pulled this up, but with our HIX, we created what's called the High Expansion Estimator. So if you guys get a hanger, you would click on, whether it's 409, 2016 or newer, or 409, 2011 and older. The biggest difference between the two is if it's older than 2016, you have to have a reserve tank. If it's 2016 or newer, you just need one tank. So that's a big deal. But anyway, we've created this estimating program, and it walks you through step by step. You put in the total square footage of that hanger that you're protecting, and then you decide whether you want a single or double generators. It does all the math for you, all your leakage rates, safety factors, durations, everything. It does it all automatically for you. So when you're done, in literally 5 minutes, you have a material list of everything that you need. You can have that go right to Viking SupplyNet. You can email it right to them, or the program will email it right to them. You can even email it to yourself and have that material list. And to be honest, that's what I would recommend. You email it to yourself so you have the list as well, and then email it on to Viking SupplyNet from your email address. And then they will quote the system for you, and you'll have it the next day. So if you're ever working on a weekend or whatever and you want to do something like that, you can get your whole system done, again, in literally 5 minutes. If you're on Revit, we have tools for Revit for HIX foam, for the great nozzles, all that. All the families are built in. So you would download this program. Our toolbar will pop up onto the Revit toolbar, and you'll be able to pick any type of product you want to add in to your riser or your system. And it's just been outstanding. We're pretty excited about it. We've created so many different programs with our digital team, and they just keep adding on to it. So pretty exciting stuff. And again, anytime you guys have questions, need help with anything, if I'm not available, Deb Baker in our office is, Scott Tanner is, any of the Viking SupplyNet sales folks are unbelievably educated in all this as well. So reach out to any of us with any questions or concerns that you may have. I know I ran through all that pretty quick, and I didn't want to take a bunch of your time today. But again, if you have any design questions, anything like that, please reach out to us. And of course, my clicker's not working here, but this is my email address and phone number. I said I'm out of Denver, Colorado, so I'm on Mountain Time, just like I think Alberta and all them are. But reach out to me anytime, and we'll get back to you. I usually try to get back to you within the same day. Sometimes it'll be the next day. But anyway, I know I'm a little ahead of schedule here, but I'd like to send it back to Taylor and go from there.
Okay, the next presenter we have for you today is Joe Donato. Joe has been an active participant in the fire protection industry for the past 30 plus years. In his current role, Joe is responsible for developing and managing Viking's line of clean agent and detection systems. Joe is NICET certified and has served the industry in both the alarm and detection and fire suppression fields. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you, Taylor. Hope everyone can hear me okay and see my PowerPoint. I want to also extend my welcome to our friends and business partners north of the border. As was mentioned, my name is Joe Donato, and I'm in business development for special hazards and detection systems for Viking. And I wanted to talk to you today. Sorry about that. Let's see here. Here we go. I want to talk to you today about some of our innovative products that we have, both on the clean agent side, the inert gas side, and some of our specialty detection products as well. And I do want to go over some of the apps that we have, some of the tools for Revit, as well as our design manager software, which will aid in designing clean agent systems and coming up with a bill of material. So, you know, our business is to provide innovative fire protection technology for the special hazards teams, including water suppression systems and agent suppression, really any sort of suppression you're dealing with out in the field. Also to provide technical support and inventory for our distributors so that we see it through the completion of their projects. So what I want to go over today is the Viking VSH, which stands for Viking Special Hazards 1230, which is our clean agent Novak 1230 product line, our VSH 200 clean agent system, which consists of the FM 200 agent for suppression. I also want to talk to you about our inert gas product called Oxio Argon, which is good for Class D metal fires and suppressing those fires. We're also going to get into some of our specialty detection products, including the Univario. It's a unique industrial detector. The thing I like about it, it utilizes the same base. So if you need to switch or if you need to go between a flame detector and a heat detector, you're able to do that. We use the same base. Typical interface to whatever you're monitoring with is relays, alarm trouble, supervisory, and it does some unique things with high temperature heat detection, for example, but I'll get into some of that when we get to that part of the presentation. Our one-use self-contained extinguishing system for computer racks. Hopefully you can see it down here. It looks like a module that would fit inside a computer rack. It takes up 1U or 1 unit of space. And although it looks like a piece of electronic equipment, it is, but it also has some unique capabilities. Built into this unit are 2 detectors. One is an incipient detector and the other one is a standard smoke detector, but they're air sampling in nature. So what we do is we come out of the back of this unit. This would install in a computer rack system, which you see in some micro data centers all over the world. Most of those micro data centers are unmanned, so they just want to protect the equipment. And that's exactly what this Viking 1U unit will do. So I mentioned the 2 detectors. They're both aspiration type, air aspiration. So there is a piece of CPVC piping that protrudes out the back of this unit and goes down the back side of the rack you're protecting. So this unit gets installed in the top 1/3 portion of your rack. Those detectors do their job. They'll give you an early warning indication of a fire in its incipient stage. They'll also give you an actual alarm condition once we reach that alarm threshold. And housed in here is a 7-pound container of Novak 1230 suppressant agent. And it gets discharged out the front of this nozzle. So it's really a complete self-contained extinguishing system for computer racks. Pretty cool system. Be happy, as Bob mentioned in his earlier presentation, any of these things I'm going to talk about today, if you want more in-depth knowledge of them, several ways of learning about these products, but I would be happy to do a webinar and go over some of these systems in more detail with you. There's also an IBC containment unit that's unique for Viking, which I'm going to talk about. That's towards the end of the presentation. And our new Viking 2x1 system, which is a self-contained clean agent system housed in the same cabinet as a pre-action system, either single interlock or double interlock. And that's made in cooperation with our partners there in Canada, Fireflex, and I'll get into that as well. So when we talk about special hazards applications, of course, we're talking about some of these mission critical facilities, these data centers, IT distribution closets, electrical switchgear rooms, power distribution, areas where are buildings or facilities where the end user is concerned about maintaining service, maintaining business. They can't have any downtime. So that's where the clean agents and some of the inert systems come into play. We want to put the fire out if there is an emergency, and we want to do so and maintain operation without any downtime. The other applications when we deal with clean agent systems in particular, we're talking about rare books or archive storage. I mentioned computer rooms, museums, and art galleries. If you haven't seen the Novak 3M product, it's pretty cool. I know they do a really nice demonstration of the product and how it works. It's actually stored as a liquid inside the tank, and it gets dispelled as a gas once it discharges. But they actually show this. The demonstrator will take a piece of tissue paper and draw on it, and they'll pour a little bit of water on it, and of course the ink runs and the paper gets dissolved, that sort of thing. And then he'll pour a little bit of the agent on there, and nothing happens to the ink. The paper is intact, and it's just a little cold to the touch. So that's very important when you're dealing with art galleries and museums. You don't want to destroy the rare properties or the rare materials that are inside the facility. So that's where clean agent comes into place. We also, some of the inert systems, I talked about Class D metal fires, engine test cells, turbines. That's where some of the inert suppression system comes into play. So I want to get into how the inert systems work. So when we talk about inert clean agent systems, basically what we do is we affect the oxygen level inside of the protected space or inside of the protected equipment. So we effectively reduce that oxygen level from 21% to something less than 16%. So by interacting with that oxygen level, we're able to suppress the fire. And that's what puts it out. Of course, the fire triangle is heat, fuel, and oxygen. In this case, when we talk about inert clean agent systems, we're affecting or we're interacting with the oxygen in the protected space that we're doing. Some of those inert solutions include nitrogen, CO2, and argon. There are also some blended inert solutions. IG55, for example, is 50% argon, 50% nitrogen, also referred to as argonite. IG541, 40% argon, 52% nitrogen, 8% CO2, also referred to as energen. We sell the argon system as part of our solution to Class D metal fires, and as you'll see, it's the best agent for, our best inert gas, I should say, for suppressing those types of fires. So here we have our fire triangle again. If you have heat, fuel, and oxygen, of course you have fire. The synthetic clean agents, now I'm talking about the VSH 1230 or the Novak 1230 systems or the VSH 200, FM 200 systems. Those types of agents, when they're discharged, interact with the heat source of the fire triangle. They have a cooling effect, and that's how they put out the fire. So by interacting with the heat, it removes that leg of the fire triangle and we suppress the fire. So that's the difference between the two. The inert gas interacts with the oxygen, depletes the oxygen level of the space or the protected piece of equipment. The synthetic clean agent systems interact with the heat and have a cooling effect, and that's how we suppress the fire. So when we're talking about clean agents and we're talking about protecting the space, NFPA 2001 classifies the hazards. Class A, for example, would be a Class A fire deals with ordinary combustible materials such as wood, cloth, paper, rubber, and plastics. Class B is flammable liquids. and Class C is a fire that involves energized electrical equipment. So when we're designing a data center or computer room, we're typically designing around a Class C fire, which is energized electrical equipment. So for Novak, for example, our design concentration for a Class C fire would be 4.5% design concentration. That's the level we need to maintain inside that protected area in order to suppress the fire. For FM200 on a Class C energized fire, we're dealing with 7.3% design concentration. So when we set up a system, when we quote a system, we're doing our calculations based on those design concentrations when it comes to clean agent. Class D combustible metals is defined in NFPA 484 as pure metal or alloys having the generally recognized properties of metal, including those fire or explosive characteristics of the metal in its various forms. So here you see the different types. The alkali metals, the combustible metals, metal alloys, magnesium, titanium, potassium, and aluminum. And I mentioned earlier that the inert gas solution that we use in our systems is called argon. So this chart, which is right out of NFPA 484, their table A15 3.3, shows the different combustible metals and their interaction with the different types of suppressant. So as you can see, when we're dealing with these alkali metals, lithium, aluminum, iron, steel, that argon is the best solution for suppressing those types of fires. You do not want to put water on most Class D fires. You will have something not good happen in that case. So we do sell a lot of argon systems. We're in the process of getting these systems approved. However, since it is the best solution for these types of combustible metal fires, we have not had any obstruction or any authority having jurisdiction not allowing us to install these argon systems in their facilities. So when we're talking about our engineered suppression systems, here I'm talking about our clean agent systems, our VSH 1230, VSH 200. One of the advantages that Viking brings to the table is they're available in 360 PSI and 725 PSI cylinders, both for FM 200 and 3M Novak 1230. So what's the biggest advantage of a higher or super pressurized cylinder or system? By going to 725 PSI, we're able to use smaller cylinders or less cylinders. We're able to use smaller piping diameters, use unbalanced piping. One of the big advantages is the long distance piping runs. So if you have let's say a computer room that you're wanting to protect, and maybe they don't want the tanks inside the room, or they don't want them just outside the room. They want them, further away than that. I've seen some systems where we've actually had the tanks 200 feet away from the protected space. Again, we couldn't do that with a lower pressure system. We have to do that with a 725 PSI pressure system. The other advantage of the higher pressure systems, again for FM200 and Novak, is the ability to replace existing halon systems. Primarily with the Novak is what I'm referring to here. So I'm working on a system right now here in the town that I live in. If I haven't mentioned it before, I'm in the middle of the country in Missouri, and we're working on a project here in St. Louis area, St. Louis Art Museum, where we're looking to replace an existing halon system, or I should say existing halon systems. There's several of them. And we ran the calcs and went through our design manager software. Actually, we used our Revit tools for this project, and we were able to utilize the same piping network. So that's a big advantage to the customer. They don't have to replace all those pipings and fittings and whatnot. They're able to use the existing piping. So if you're interested in information on that, if you're looking to take over an existing halon system, get with Scott or get with myself, and we'll provide you some documentation that discuss that specific application and how we work with the 725 PSI cylinders. Basically, what we have is more pressure available after we're pushing it through the out from the cylinder and through our piping network. So you can see here on this chart, our standard pressure 360 PSI system versus our 725 PSI system. So our typical pressure loss at our nozzle is 111 PSI. And the pressure loss at the cylinder valve is about 116 PSI. So do the math and what you have left over to push that agent through the piping network and the T's and the fittings and whatnot. On a standard pressurized 360 PSI system, you're looking at 133 PSI versus close to 500 PSI on a high pressure 725 PSI system. So again, that enables us to use smaller cylinders, run the piping network further, use smaller piping, and if we're replacing an existing halon system, in most cases, we're able to use, almost all cases, but most cases, I'll say, we're able to utilize the existing piping network without having to replace all that. So some of the advantages I just reviewed: marginal piping removal, allows for smaller pipe sizing, greater flexibilities. I'm kind of repeating myself here, but it's a nice thing that we like to brag about that we have. And here is the actual link that I was talking about. We published a white paper on halon replacement and replacing it with 725 PSI systems, or super pressurized systems. So that is available to you. Some other advantages of our 1230 VSH 1230 725 PSI system. We're able to do multi-zone as an option. This could replace multiple single zone systems with fewer containers, less space and costs. We'd have to run the calcs and see if that's more of an economical solution for you, but at the higher pressure systems, we do have that capability. Now getting back to our argon, our inert gas solutions, some of the applications that we're looking at, you see over here on the right, some lithium ion test sites, magnesium machining, bag houses. We do a lot of aluminum or metal bag dust collectors, bag houses, things of that sort, and also 3D printers. Now, when we're dealing, I mentioned the design concentrations earlier for the clean agent systems. When we're talking about the inert gas, we're actually designing it at 80% design concentration per NFPA requirements, and we're having to hold time of 20 minutes. I did mention that the UL listing is pending. Hopefully we'll have that shortly, but however, since it's a perfect solution for your Class D metal fires, we have not had a system not been approved for use. And here you see some of the applications for those, some dust collectors and some bag houses and some machining equipment that is a good solution for oxyl argon inert gas. Okay, I mentioned the tools for Revit. This is really cool. We have two ways for you to estimate, calculate, design, and lay out our clean agent systems. One of them you're looking at here. This is the Viking tools for Revit, and this is a free download on our website under our digital resources tool. And you can see here it's not just populated with clean agent, it's also our foam systems, our valves, our sprinkler heads, our valve configurator. This is the complete software system for that. So I'll see if I can run it through here. So what you're able to do by going to our clean agent assistant option here, you click on it, you start a project, you select a room size, you're able to run your calculations based on the dimensions of that room. You're able to draw out the piping network. You're able to place the containers. Basically, you're able to do a full design of the system by utilizing this Viking tools for Revit. And it is populated with all of our families, our tanks, our panels, you name it, when it comes to the design of a clean agent system. So this tool is available free of charge to you, or for you, I should say, on our website. If you're using Revit, it's fantastic, it's great. If you're not using Revit, I'll just let this thing run through. We do have our design manager program. So typically in the past, what we've done is we want to make sure our customers know these systems. We do in-house training, which is still available to you. With the pandemic, we're kind of limited on people don't want to get together in large groups, so we're kind of limited on when we run those classes. But that's one way of doing it, is come to our clean agent class up in Caledonia, Michigan. Another way of doing it is we brought it online. So if you're interested in our self-paced online clean agent system course, let Scott know. I'll send you the link and we'll get you signed up. It's a self-paced course. Once you complete the course, you have access to our design manager software. This is still showing the Revit portion of it, and this will print out a whole calculation submittal package for you in this form. Here's the calculations. You also have the pipe layout there, the pipes and fittings, what you need. It's shown in 3D, and again, there's the download for that. But by attending our class, whether you do it online or whether you do it in Caledonia, Michigan, you have access to our Viking Design Manager software, which basically does the same thing, only it's not in Revit. So if you don't have Revit, this is the way you want to go. And this will do your quantity calculations. This will do your layout, your piping. You have to enter your nodes and which direction you want to go. It'll lay out a full system, but our Clean Agent course will take you through what you need to know to run this software. So this one, after you take the class, again, either online or in person, you have a 30-day free trial of the Viking Design Manager software. After that 30 days, you can buy the software on a yearly basis, and I want to say it's about $600 US, but don't quote me on that. So those are your two options. If you have the Revit, the free Viking tools for Revit is the way to go. Still recommend you take the class. You can do it online or in person, but you can use that, or you can get access to the Design Manager software after you take our class. Okay, detection and control. Here's some of the products that we have here. I showed you the 1U, the self-contained, self-extinguishing system. We also sell the Extralis Vesda air sampling systems. Protect-A-Wires available. We have the Univario detection, and of course panels that are listed up in Canada, some Potter panels and the Notifier NFS 320, the Viking BFR 400. So we have both conventional and addressable panels available to you, and of course all the peripheral appliances that go with that. This is the Univario. So it's available in flame detection, triple IR, or UV, ultraviolet detection. And I mentioned at the beginning, we use the same base whether we're talking about a UV IR detector or whether we're talking about heat detectors. What I really like about this unit is not only it uses the same base, so we're able to swap out detectors. It's configurable based on your mounting height, or your mounting application, I should say. You have to buy a relay card for it, if you want to interface with something, which you typically do. But these industrial heat detectors, I don't know if you see this here. This will go up to 850 degrees Celsius. I hope I did the math right on that. You can, up in Canada, can correct me on that, but you can see it goes up to a very high temperature, 1560 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a heat detector. That's a fixed temperature heat detector. And you can get it in different applications with a standard rod or extended rod or a flexible tubing rod. So we're able to now do heat detection in some places where you wouldn't normally think, like ovens, processing ovens. So we would install this detector outside of the unit. The flexible tubing you can order this to length. There's our standard length that comes in, and the probe would actually fit inside the oven in this case, or the protected space, and that's your heat detection. So this would be installed outside of the process, or the oven in this case, and the probe would be inside, and you have a heat detector that you see these temperature ranges it can go up to. So here's some of the applications: duct heat detection, outdoor, indoor environments, industrial environments, painting facilities, ovens. Here you see one installed in ductwork up here on the right-hand corner. Our flame detectors, obviously you're talking about, used a lot in foam system, airport hangars, fueling areas, power emergency generators, and paint booths. So the Univario is a pretty slick detector. This is our IBC containment. I know I'm rushing, but there's a lot to cover here and I'm kind of limited on time. Only got a few minutes left. This is our IBC containment unit that's available. So really any of your customers or end users or clients that store flammable liquids, they store them in these intermediate bulk storage containers. And they typically, if they don't have this touch system, they have these out on the floor of their warehouse or wherever. So if these things get punctured and leak, you have flammable liquids spilling all over the place. Or if there, God forbid, there's a fire, you have a bigger emergency than that. So what this unit does is it contains a spill. Underneath here is a flame retardant grid. So any of that flammable liquid that spills will get contained in the containment unit down here. And if it is on fire, the fire is not allowed to pass through that flame retardant grid that's there. And this will also contain not only the flammable liquids, but it will also contain I forget how many gallons, a lot of gallons. I'll send you all the data sheet on this, or you can download it off our website. Additional fluid, such as if a sprinkler head were to go off, it'll contain that as well. Last but not least, our Viking 2x1. I mentioned this is made in conjunction with our friends at Fireflex there in Canada. So if you want inside a cabinet, a combination engineered system that contains both clean agent, either Novak 1230 or FM 200 at either 360 or 725 PSI. And it also houses a single interlock or a double interlock pre-action system. You can get that in the same container. The detection for that unit is shared by both the pre-action system and the clean agent system. So this is available in our with our valve sizes of 2-inch and 3-inch. For single interlock, and that mainly has to do with the space we're dealing with here. So here you see a good picture of it. Here's our tank, our clean agent tank, and here's our riser and our trim for our sprinkler system. So here's our deluge valve that we use on our pre-action systems, and here's our notifier releasing panel that we're using as well. So this system actually comes in a conventional configuration. If you are a notifier distributor, you will have access to the programming key where you can make it addressable, but we can make this an addressable system if need be, depending on your application. But if you're looking for a self-contained system, pre-action, clean agent in a canister, there it is. And it's pre-trimmed. All you have to do, it's designed to be plugged and played. You have to install your water line. You have to install your drain, and if there's any detection, you hook it on the panel, and that's about it. It's good to go. So that's the Viking 2x1. There's our valve, again, for single interlock pre-action or double interlock pre-action, and housing a clean agent system as well. And there's just more information on our valve, our deluge valve. Of course, the clean agent is the same thing I talked about, only it's inside of a cabinet, utilizing either the Novak 1230 or the FM 200, and you can get it in either our standard pressurized system or our super pressurized system. Whoa, that was a lot. So I thank you. I thank you for your time. I did cover a lot here, but again, if you're interested in more information, get in touch with Scott Tanner or myself, and we will provide additional information for you, and we also available to do a webinar if you so desire. So my time is up. Thanks for your time.
Okay, our next presenter today is Darren Palmieri. Darren is the product manager for residential sprinklers, specific application sprinklers, and CPVC at Viking. He's worked in the fire protection industry for 15 years, focusing on product development, marketing, and business development. Darren participates in several industry associations and currently serves as chair of NFSA's Residential Committee and is also a member of NFPA's Technical Committee on Residential Sprinkler Systems. Welcome, Darren.
Thanks, Taylor. I appreciate the introduction. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to, and I appreciate Joe giving me a little extra time ending early, because I'm going to use up a lot of time going through a number of topics, including specific application sprinklers, a little bit on CPVC, a little bit on residential sprinklers, and also talk about a new antifreeze product we have on the market. So what I'm going to start with, our specific application sprinklers, and the first one I'm going to talk about is the new window sprinkler that we launched earlier this year, new window sprinklers. If you're familiar with the application of window sprinklers, they are intended to be an alternative for a 2-hour rated wall assembly, mostly used in interior walls. Okay, so when you want to, or the engineer or the architect wants to utilize glazing or windows in an interior 2-hour rated wall assembly, there's a couple choices. One of them is to use 2-hour rated glazing or glass, which is very expensive, or utilize window sprinklers to protect the glazing. So very specific type sprinklers. Normally when we talk about fire protection and fire sprinklers, we're talking about suppressing or controlling fires. In this case, we're actually getting put into the IBC and into other building codes where you're talking about equivalency of rated walls. So, you know, much different when we talk the rating of walls and using window sprinklers compared to controlling fires. So these are very specific for utilizing and protecting glazing in walls. I have a video here that I hope plays. It looks like it is, at least on my screen here. But this shows you a short video showing you the window sprinklers operating. This is in the furnace, so this is in a test furnace, and you could see that, you know, we're covering, the key to these window sprinklers and why they're unique is that they cover corner to corner, the glass corner to corner. There's no dry spots, and that's part of the listing. You have to be able to meet the equivalency to this 2-hour rating, and part of that is the complete wetting of the glazing of the window surface. So these deflectors, the sprinklers themselves are specifically designed to go corner to corner with water on the glazing. So the most common questions, you know, besides when you have these come up in projects, they're usually pushed down through the architects and the engineering community as a design element in a project. The question always comes up, well, where can I actually apply these types of window sprinklers? And there are limitations. So I'm going to go through some of those, the glass requirements for these window sprinklers. So the glazing, it's fairly simple. You know, it must be at least a 1/4 inch thick, and it has to be heat strengthened or tempered glass, which most is. So that's typically not an issue. We are limited on height, so 13 feet max on height, although there is no width restrictions as long as they're, you know, separated by vertical mullions or butt joints. So there's no length, there's no limitation on the length of that wall. Horizontal mullions, this comes up all the time. So intermediate horizontal mullions are not permitted, right? Because going back to that video and the description of these sprinklers, we need to have full wetting on the glazing itself. So anything that could interrupt that water going over the entire piece of glazing wouldn't work. So horizontal mullions are not allowed. So vertical mullions, yes, right, because we can separate the panes and put sprinklers, like in this picture on the lower right, where we could have window sprinklers on each piece of glazing. So horizontal mullions, no. The other thing that comes up is operability. So basically anything that's opening. So if it's a window that opens, that's not an application for window sprinklers. If it's a door, glass door, not an application for window sprinklers. So this is only for non-operable fixed glazing, right? So permanent fixed windows. Another thing that often comes up, part of the listing is when these are installed, we need to be able to keep combustible materials at least 2 inches from the face of the glazing. And one of the ways we describe in doing that is to create a 3-foot pony wall that could keep any types of combustible, say a waste paper basket or some other type of combustible, away from that glazing. That's one way to do it. We also note that there's an alternative where, another acceptable method per the AHJ. So there are other creative ways to make sure that we can't push some type of combustible against the glazing, right, to keep it 2 inches from there. So although the pony wall is something that we outline and we talk about specifically, this 3-foot pony wall, there are other methods that are acceptable to your local jurisdiction that would allow the window sprinklers to be used. So another thing that comes up as far as glazing came up last week. A couple questions from an engineer. This was a curved glass situation. That's not an application for window sprinklers. Okay, so it can't be curved or sloped. It has to be vertical and flat for window sprinklers, vertical and flat, because it all really goes back to the corner to corner coverage of the water. So that said, that's the application for these sprinklers. Viking has 2 models of these. So we have a vertical pendant sidewall type, that's the VK 460 on the right, and we have the horizontal sidewall, which is the VK 462. There are some listing differences with these products. The VK 460 can be spaced further than the 62, the VK 462. So the pendant vertical sidewall model can be spaced up to 12 feet apart. The horizontal sidewall model has a max spacing of 8 feet. So that's a big difference. The other big difference is you can fully space, when you space the pendant vertical sidewall at any spacing up to 12 feet, it's only 15 GPM. When you space the horizontal sidewall, there's two flows depending on how far apart you space them. So there is a difference. Most of the application, I would say 75 to 80% of the application is for the pendant vertical sidewall model, as opposed to the horizontal sidewall model. Okay. So the next technology I'm going to talk about are institutional sprinklers. These are also specialty sprinklers. And it's not a type of sprinkler that manufacturers update very often. This is a sprinkler that, it's a kind of almost a once in a generation type change. So we did just launch these. And I want to talk a little bit about institutional sprinklers in general, right? So NFPA does define what institutional sprinklers are. So they're designed for resistance to load bearing and designed so the components can't be converted into weapons. So we have to take that direction and try to figure out how do we make a device that meets that requirement. And I'll explain that in a minute. So obviously institutional sprinklers, the first thing you think of are, prisons or jails, and that obviously is a very big market for these, but they're also used through mental health facilities. We've seen them used in some schools. We've seen them used in places where they have holding cells of some kind. So it doesn't have to be a whole facility that's utilizing these sprinklers. It can just be part of a facility or even a few rooms within a facility that utilize these types of sprinklers. And what we're doing here is we go back to the NFPA definition of what these are. So a misconception of these sprinklers is that we think that they're going to be tamper-proof because they're in these types of facilities. And apparently when you're incarcerated, you have a lot of time to think about what you could do and maybe what you could damage in the space that you're in. But they're not really designed to be tamper-proof at all. They're actually designed to incorporate these tamper-resistant and breakaway features. So it goes back to that definition, right? So they can't bear, a heavy load, and they can't be easily taken apart to create weapons. Those are two things that we definitely don't want people to do. So in reality, these sprinklers are designed to operate if they're tampered with, right? So if somebody tries to get a metal piece out of it to make a weapon, we want the sprinkler to operate. If somebody is going to try to hang themselves potentially from the device, we want it to operate. So those are what we do. That's what we build into this particular sprinkler, and they're very special. They're very sophisticated devices. So what we introduced are our brand new line of institutional sprinklers. They're both, so we have a pendant version and a sidewall version, both standard coverage and extended coverage versions of both. They're all 5.6K, and the extended coverage version can be used up to 16 by 16. So we incorporated a couple really key features. So as we developed this kind of once in a generation product, we really talked to the customers and we figured out some of the key things that they wanted in this product. One of them is the way it's installed. So what we have is we have a wrenchable cap. So what that means is that you do not, that orange cap that's a protective cap for the sprinkler remains on during installation. So you put the wrench on top of the protective cap, which might not seem like that big a deal, but it actually is a big deal because it all ties back to what I said before about these sprinklers being somewhat delicate, let's say. So the last thing we want to do is damage that sprinkler when we put the metal wrench on it, right? So having a wrenchable cap really helps lessen the potential to damage the sprinkler itself during installation. So that's a really nice feature that's only with the Viking institutional sprinklers. The other thing we incorporated is on the outside of the sprinkler, on the link itself, we incorporated the SIN number and also the type of sprinkler. So the orientation of the sprinkler, whether it's a horizontal sidewall or whether it's a pendant sprinkler. And why is that important? It's important because the pendants and the sidewalls look identical. So without the markings on the outside, there would be really no way to determine which sprinkler was which. So if they were installed in the correct position, right? So a sprinkler contractor, sprinkler installer can make sure visually from the outside, did I install this correctly? And then from an inspection perspective, it's also easily identified as a sidewall or a pendant, and that's really key. So a couple nice features there with our institutional sprinklers. Next topic, another specific application, attic sprinklers. Attic sprinklers have been around for over 20 years now, and there was a patent on attic technology that lasted a very long time, but within the last 4 to 5 years, that patent did expire, and now there is significant competition in this specific application, attic sprinkler space. And we just launched in the last couple months a new attic sprinkler. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go through these real quick, and then I'll do a slide on each one. But we've had the back-to-back attic sprinkler. I'll talk about that. We've had the single directional attic sprinkler. We launched a hip sprinkler about 2 years ago. This new one that we're going to talk about today also is our EP model, which is our downslope attic sprinkler. And then we also have our attic upright sprinkler, kind of the utility attic sprinkler. So this is the line. They're all specific applications, meaning that you get those advantages if you're utilizing them in a wet type system. If it's antifreeze, let's say, then you could utilize CPVC to feed these sprinklers. If you're using specific application attic sprinklers, you can also utilize CPVC to feed the sprinklers on the floor below. So if you have pendants feeding that top floor of an apartment building, let's say, and you're protecting that attic space, the combustible attic space with attic sprinklers, you can also utilize CPVC to protect the floor below. If you were to use standard spray uprights and design it per NFPA 13, you would have to use steel pipe to protect that floor below. So some nice advantages to being able to go to the specific application attic sprinklers. And just saying that it always goes back to, these are, because they are specific application, you're not going to find design criteria application of these sprinklers in NFPA. So you're not going to find these in 13. Where you're going to find the information on how to design and apply these particular sprinklers it's in the data sheets. So it's in the manufacturer's data sheets, and that's what makes them specific application. So they are tested, they're UL listed sprinklers, but all of the information on how to apply these sprinklers exists in the manufacturer's technical data sheet. So the first ones we'll talk about, I think, are the most common ones that people recognize as specific application attic sprinklers. And these are our back-to-back sprinklers and our single directional sprinklers. And these sprinklers are typically used, or almost always used, at the ridge or the peak of the main peak of the attic, right, which is the high point of the attic in a sloped attic condition. So a back-to-back does exactly what it says. You would run it along the peak or the ridge, and it actually throws water in both directions, down towards the eaves, okay? In a perfect world scenario, you could protect an attic with a single line of back-to-backs, up to a 60-foot span attic with one line of back-to-backs, with one line of back-to-back sprinklers. So really throw a lot of water. So that would be a perfect scenario. We know that a lot of these attics often include other areas. There's changes of elevations, there's dormers, there's hip areas. So, you know, while we might not come across this very frequently, the situation where you can run one line, they are still very useful and they cover a large area. Single directional is the same kind of thing. Well, what they do is that if you had a ridge that had you know, some type of obstruction or blocking, you'd have sprinklers that just throw in one direction down towards the eave, right? And these are listed from anywhere from a 412 slope all the way up to a very steep 1212 slope. And, you know, there are different models for the three categories of slope. So 412 to 712, 7 to 10, and then up to 12. And what I have here, hopefully it plays correctly, is a short video of the spray pattern of a back-to-back sprinkler. So this video is taken at in our flow lab in our new facility in Michigan, where we're able to take all of our sprinklers, tie them to solenoid valves, and actually flow them to show people actually what they do. So not many people get to see an attic sprinkler actually flow, but this is a back-to-back attic sprinkler, which, as I said, could throw up to 60 feet up to 60 feet going both ways, so 30 feet each way. So the next sprinkler I'm going to talk about is I call it our utility attic sprinkler. So this is our attic upright. And there's there's multiple uses for this sprinkler, but I'm going to talk about a few of them. The two previous most common ways to use the sprinkler was to utilize it with back-to-backs and single directional sprinklers to increase the span that you're able to throw. Okay, so I mentioned that a back-to-back sprinkler can cover an area cover a span of an attic, a sloped attic, up to 60 feet with one row of back-to-backs potentially, right? So if you added some attic upright sprinklers at the eaves, aligned at each eaves, now you can cover a span all the way up to 80 feet, right? So these attic uprights, a line of them at the eaves or near the eaves would give you an additional 10-foot span. So now you're looking at 3 lines of sprinklers, specific application attic sprinklers, that could be used to cover up to an 80-foot span utilizing back-to-backs. And the same concept holds true with utilizing some single directionals. So back-to-backs can be, attic uprights can be used with the single directional sprinklers also to allow for a further coverage of that single directional sprinkler. And on the right, there's a detail from our data sheet showing that how the attic upright can also be used in a situation where you have a hip attic. And the hip attic, a hip area of the attic that's not easily covered with, say, our hip sprinkler, which I'll talk about next, you can fill in this area and stagger attic upright sprinklers to cover that hip section as long as you're using it in conjunction with the other specific application sprinklers, okay? So that's one of the conditions with attic upright sprinklers, is that they need to be used with our other specific application attic sprinklers. They're not to be used alone to solely protect an attic space. So in that detail on the right, you'll see that that one area in the center is utilizing a line of back-to-backs to cover the main ridge or the main peak of that attic. And then we have the attic upright sprinklers staggered throughout the 2 hip areas. That's a great application and a very common application of the attic upright sprinkler. So speaking of hips, there is a specific application attic sprinkler just for hip areas, right? So that's our attic hip sprinkler, the VK660. So where you would use this is along the hip ridge. So the main ridge is that peak or the high ridge that runs through the attic, right? And that's where you'd typically be utilizing your back-to-backs or your single directional sprinklers. The hip ridge is that ridge that slopes down towards the corner of the building, okay? And these throw in multi-directions, so they throw in 2 directions in a 90-degree angle down the hip. But you need to have the right framing to do that. So if you have the right framing set up, so you're not actually creating an obstruction of the spray pattern of the hip sprinkler, these are great sprinklers to use, and they can cover a hip effectively. If you do have a different construction method where you would be obstructing the spray pattern by utilizing the hip sprinklers, that's where you would go to what we talked about on the last slide, which is utilizing the attic upright sprinklers in those hip areas to cover it. So there's a couple ways to deal with hips when you're in these combustible attic spaces. So the next sprinkler is our new EP attic sprinkler. And you use these in conjunction with attic uprights, but think about it this way. We talked about the back-to-backs and the single directionals used at the ridge or the peak of the attic. These sprinklers, what this does is it kind of reverses that, right? So with the back-to-backs, you would use the uprights at the eaves as additional lines to make a bigger span. Here, you're actually taking the uprights and you're putting them at the ridge, typically where the back-to-backs would be in the other way of protecting attics with specific application sprinklers. So in this situation here, you can see from this detail that we have a line of attic uprights at the ridge or the peak of the attic. And then along the downslope, we have lines of the EP sprinkler. And they're mostly a single directional type sprinkler. So they look a lot like single directionals. So they throw mostly down towards the eave, and then they throw a little bit in the other direction, but mostly down towards the eave. So what are some of the advantages? Why would you want to use this scenario? So first and foremost, because we're putting the uprights at the ridge, these are going to be lower flowing systems, right? The back-to-backs at the ridge are very demanding sprinklers, right? I showed you that video. They're throwing 60 feet, right? They're throwing 30 feet in each direction. So these are demanding systems when you use back-to-back sprinklers or even single directional sprinklers at the ridge. Here you're utilizing the uprights at the ridge, which are less demanding. So we're talking about an overall, if you have the right attic, these could potentially be a much less demanding system to protect the attic. So that's one advantage. Another thing is that when we looked at this and getting feedback from our customers and how things were being built, we realized roof pitches have been changing over the years. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to be able to cover all the way down to 2.5 over 12 slope, which is just barely a slope. But what that does is that closes the gap between where we can use combustible concealed space sprinklers, which we'll talk about in a little while, in an attic space, because you can use those in flat or up to 212 slope attics. So now we got the combustible concealed space there up to 212. Now we created a sprinkler that goes from 2.5 up to 612. So now we covered kind of that gap in the area that existed, because the back-to-backs and single directionals, like I said before, start out at 4 over 12, right? So there was a gap between 2 over 12 and 4 over 12 where there wasn't really a good solution to use specific application attic sprinklers. Now we've kind of covered that gap. So there's a couple reasons here, why we may choose to use this system going forward. The other thing we're able to do is we're able to expand the design to cover spans beyond 80 feet, right? So with back-to-backs at the ridge, we can go up to 80 feet, like I said. When we use this particular design method and putting the uprights at the ridge and the EPs on the downslope, we can add, just like in this detail here, we could add another line of attic uprights at the eave, and now we're talking about covering an attic with a span of up to 100 feet. So we added another 20 foot to the potential span of the attic. So a couple of really nice additions to being able to protect attics. So people don't have to go back to the to NFPA 13 with standard spray uprights. And that was another solution for potentially protecting attics. So I'm going to get into now combustible concealed space sprinklers. So similar to attic sprinklers, these have been around for quite a while. So when we're talking about combustible concealed spaces, we're talking about a couple of main categories here. We're talking about the spaces in between floors. So these are generally wood frame type construction. Full 13 type construction is where we use these. So we're not talking about NFPA 13D. We're not talking about NFPA 13R. We're talking about NFPA 13. So just like with the attic sprinklers, that's typically when we get into protecting attics, is in these NFPA 13 applications. So the two main areas are those areas between the floors, and also, like I mentioned just before, those areas that might be a flat attic space or a slightly sloped attic or roof. So two areas where we can use combustible concealed space sprinklers. And I'm going to talk specifically about the most commonly used sprinkler, and a sprinkler where Viking has a really nice advantage over the competition, which is our VK950, and it's our 5.6K coin sprinkler. We call them our coin sprinklers. These are for combustible concealed spaces, interstitial spaces, are what those areas are called. And these are the latest in the technology. So we're talking about maximum spacings all the way up to 16 by 16. And now we're able to protect depths of 6 inches up to 60 inches. So these sprinklers have changed a lot over the last 20 years. It used to be The initial combustible concealed space sprinklers are limited to 12-foot spacings and very limited on their depths. Now we've really turned them into extended coverage sprinklers with quite a big change in the depth that we're able to protect. So what gives us our big advantage is going back to the original combustible concealed sprinklers. There was always a requirement to add draft curtains when you utilize these sprinklers. And the listing always included the requirement for draft curtains every 1,000 square feet when you utilize these types of sprinklers. So what Viking has done in the last year or two is we've gone back to UL to challenge that, and we've challenged it in testing. And what we've come to is that through a multiple series of tests, we've gotten to the point where you can utilize only, and this is only with the VK950, you can utilize that sprinkler without draft curtains. So this is a pretty big deal. It's a big change for anybody that's used these sprinklers over the years. So I'm going to go over, there are specifics. You got to really dig into the data sheet a little bit, but there are some specifics on how you can utilize the sprinkler without draft curtains. And it really has to do mostly with construction type. So here are the two main details of it. And like I said, there's more language in our data sheets, and that's where you go to learn, all the specifics about using these sprinklers. But no draft curtains required. When the truss, so this is wood, open web wood truss construction, okay, or solid wood joist, you can space the coin at 14 by 14. So if the wood truss is on edge, if the top cord of that truss is on edge, that 2x4 is turned vertically, right? That's what we call on edge. The maximum spacing is 14 by 14, okay? If that top cord is on its face in a more traditional looking open web joist, right, on the right there, if that top cord is on its face, you can go all the way to the maximum spacing of 16 by 16. Okay, so those are generally the two requirements that you would look for to when you could use these without draft curtains, and two very common construction types. So cord on edge with these open frame with open web construction, cord on edge 14-foot spacing, cord on its face, you can go all the way up to 16-foot spacing. No draft curtains required. Okay. Talk a little bit about residential sprinklers, and I picked two categories of sprinklers here to go over, and they're both concealed sprinklers. So for reasons that I'll explain, because this is really where, in the residential world, this is where everything's heading. So I've been around this industry for a while, and I've seen this shift towards from semi-recessed style frame sprinklers now to concealed sprinklers. It first happened with the pendant style sprinklers, concealed pendants, and now it's happening with concealed sidewalls. So this trend and this shift is happening very quick, where people in the residential world really are into aesthetics and wanting these sprinklers to disappear into the ceiling. And that's where we get, or the walls, in the case of the sidewalls, it's really where we get this demand for concealed sprinklers. And I'm going to touch upon a few of our key things here. We are the only manufacturer that have two different K factors for concealed sidewalls. Okay, so there are some other residential concealed sidewalls in the market, but most manufacturers of those are limited to one K factor. We actually have two, and we have the biggest coverage areas. So the VK480, which is our smaller K factor, it's a 4.0 K factor. Initially targeted for NFPA 13D, 13R with their 0.05 densities. We do see it used a lot in some mid and high rises too, but we also have a sprinkler that's specifically more designed for the 0.1 density applications of NFPA 13 residential, and that's the VK490. So that really targets that multifamily, the high rise, the mid and high rise residential, and also the hospitality type segments with hotels, potentially, high rise dorms, those types of applications. The larger K factor gives you that lower starting pressure when you need to use NFPA 13. And we also increased the spacings with the VK490. So now we go all the way out to 16 by 22 and to 18 by 20 with us. So we have these really extended coverages with that, which has come in super handy with some of those hospitality applications in the last few years. So big growth category for our company, big growth category for residential sprinklers in general is the concealed sidewall category. Next thing I'll talk about is our concealed pendant sprinklers, because we have over the last couple of years gone through a complete update of our concealed pendant sprinklers. So we have 3 K factors outlined here. We got the VK496, the 494, and the 498. So we have 3K, 49, 58K. All glass bulb. That was a big refresh for us. So we kind of started this brand new platform a few years ago with the VK94, 494, and we've rolled that out now to the VK496 and 498, which are all glass bulb style concealed pendant sprinklers. One of the things I'll mention is that we really focused here when we developed these new sprinklers, the new models, with the focus on the intermediate temperature versions of these models, because what happened a couple cycles ago with NFPA is they changed the allowance for intermediate temperature sprinklers. So it used to be, let's go with like pre-2013 in NFPA 13, 13D and 13R, you could only use intermediate temperature sprinklers where you expected these higher heat areas. So like, you know, if you needed to be in a room that had a laundry room, or you needed to be near a heat source because there was no other way to put it, or if you were going to be in a skylight, let's say, there was a number of places where NFPA really said if you need to be near a heat source, you can use an intermediate temperature sprinkler, but the rest of the application you need to use ordinary temperature sprinklers. So they changed that, and they've gone to where you can use ordinary temperature sprinklers or intermediate temperature sprinklers throughout the occupancy. And that's a big change. So, you know, where we used to see red bulbs everywhere, we're getting used to seeing yellow, and in this case, green bulbs, right? So once you get to yellow bulbs, those are 175 degree temperature sprinklers. You get to green bulbs, it's 200 degree temperature sprinklers. So what we did when we launched all 3 of these concealed sprinklers is we came out with both 155 ordinary temp and 200 degree intermediate temp. And what we're finding is that designs are really leaning towards going intermediate temperature throughout, right? For a lot of reasons. One, it offers you a lot of design flexibility. So now you can place intermediate temperature sprinklers everywhere, which really gives you that advantage to being closer to heat sources, okay? The other thing is it eliminates potentially a sprinkler in the spare head cabinet, right? So when you use 2 different temperature sprinklers, you need to have both temperatures in the spare head cabinet. And then, you know, from a logistics point of view, you only have to have potentially 1 sprinkler on the job. You don't need to have those handful of intermediate temperature sprinklers that typically, you know, get forgotten or left behind because of whatever reason. So really good reasons just to simply go to all intermediate temp. The other part of it is with the Viking sprinklers, there's no penalty. So there's no flow and pressure penalty for going up in temperature. So both our ordinary and our intermediate temperature sprinklers have minimum flows and pressures at all spacings. They're exactly the same. So they're interchangeable as far as flows and pressures. For example, our VK494 at 16 by 16, it's the most popular coverage area, is 13 GPM at 7 PSI for both the ordinary temperature sprinkler and the intermediate temperature sprinkler. So no flow, no pressure penalty when it comes to going to an intermediate temperature sprinkler. The other nice advantage, like I mentioned, is this proximity to heat sources. You can just be a lot closer to all these potential heat sources in a residential occupancy when you utilize intermediate temperature sprinklers. So gives you a lot more flexibility in design. It might give you flexibility if something changed on a job site, like they you know, they had designed in a stove somewhere, but, you know, you get on site and that kitchen is rearranged. And so maybe now you're too close if you were using an ordinary temperature sprinkler. So lots of flexibility when you go into intermediate temp. So that covers just a few highlights of the residential sprinklers that Viking has to offer. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about CPVC and specifically our newest technology. But just to let you know, Viking is a full line manufacturer of BlazeMaster CPVC. We make our own pipe in a dedicated CPVC pipe manufacturing facility in Huntsville, Alabama, and we make CPVC BlazeMaster CPVC fittings in another dedicated plant in Charleston, Indiana. So we have two CPVC facilities, and we make our complete line of BlazeMaster CPVC. We just introduced recently our new InstaSeal adapter, which is a new straight thread sprinkler head adapter that seals against a gasket. So what that means is that you're sealing without the use of thread sealant and without the use of pipe dope. So any type of Teflon tape or pipe thread sealant is not required when you use these. And this has been a trend going on in the industry now for a number of years, where the manufacturers of these products have gone towards these simple installations. So a couple advantages of ours is that they're all brass threads, and we have a very robust seat for the sprinkler to sit on. So we launched these earlier this year, and we've had so far a lot of success with people utilizing the InstaSeal sprinkler head adapters. So that's really all I wanted to talk about as far as CPVC, just to let everybody know that we are, you know, a full line manufacturer of BlazeMaster. So Viking Plastics has been in it for quite a while. So the next and last thing I'm going to talk about is a new product that came out probably about a month or two ago. And we launched this and we developed this in conjunction with our partner with CPVC. So Lubrizol, which is our resin vendor for our CPVC, also worked on the development of this FreezeMaster antifreeze. And this antifreeze segment is super interesting because there's been so many changes in the last 10 years or so. So antifreeze used to have, you know, significant use throughout fire protection up until about 2008, 9, 10. And there were some issues with certain systems, certain high pressure systems, where they actually contributed to the spread of fire. And, you know, ultimately NFPA came to the decision that some of these systems were dangerous. And, you know, there was a TIA that went through, I think it was in 2010, and basically said that you no longer can use antifreeze in new fire sprinkler systems. And so in a way, it kind of banned the use of using antifreeze. So, but what they have allowed is they've allowed antifreeze to continue to be used in existing antifreeze systems, but that's now coming to an end. So, so these two dates here, one of them goes back now over 8 years, and that's with new systems. And basically, NFPA said that if you're gonna use antifreeze in a new system, it has to be a listed antifreeze. But up until about 1.5 years ago, there was no such thing as a listed antifreeze. That changed when one of our competitors came out with a product. It was first listed antifreeze on the market, so now there was actually an opportunity to do new systems with antifreeze. And now we've come out with a product, so now there's 2 listed antifreezes on the market. So new systems can be installed with antifreeze. Existing systems is another issue. So now we got all these older systems that have non or unlisted antifreeze in them, and that's coming to a close in a couple of years. So as of right now, NFPA is saying that by September 30th, 2022, the existing antifreeze systems that have unlisted antifreeze in them need to be transitioned to a listed antifreeze by that date. So there's some discussions going on with NFPA. This is where it stands. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Freeze Master antifreeze. So what we have is a listed antifreeze, and I'm going to talk about some of these temperatures here, because people always want to talk about the temperature. So this minimum use temperature, that is where our UL listing is. So the minimum use temperature is -12F, -24C, and that's where the listing is, okay? There's a safety factor built in, because the freeze point doesn't really start until -15F, -26C, which is really where that solution starts to crystallize and you start to see some freezing. There's also these other temperatures as you get colder, where we talk about pour point and burst point. Those are there kind of just as for your information only to understand how this liquid works. But you can see that it has to be super cold, you know, -50C before you're talking about this solution freezing solid and potentially bursting. So the key number here is -12 or -24C, which is that minimum use temperature, which is for the listing. So when we launched this, NFPA also made some changes to the size limitations of the systems that you can use with antifreeze. So pre the launch of this product, which was about 8 weeks ago, NFPA 13 and 13R had unlimited application, size application for antifreeze. What they've done now is they've limited that to 500 gallons when you're talking about NFPA 13 and NFPA 13R. And in 13R, we're talking about the dwelling units, the residential portions of those dwelling units. So we've limited it to 500 gallons, which I don't think is that big a deal. I mean, those are big antifreeze systems, right? 500 gallons. The major change came into when you get into NFPA 13, okay? And specifically 13 light hazard. So it was that anything beyond 13D and 13R had a 40-gallon limitation. And it still does when you get into ordinary hazards, group 1 and 2, and into storage. There's still a 40-gallon limitation right now when you're in those hazards for NFPA 13. But in light hazard, right, and you can think of all those potential light hazard applications, what they've done is they've changed it to allow you to go up to 200 gallons in an antifreeze system, and you design it as just a regular wet system, right? You can go up to 200 gallons. You can go all the way up to 500 gallons. So if you need to go above 200 gallons, you can go all the way up to 500 gallons. The only thing you have to do is you have to design it as a dry system. So you basically have to design it with the penalty built in, 30% penalty built in. So you're not installing it as a dry system, you're just designing it. Your design criteria is as a dry system. You can go all the way to 500 gallons, an NFPA 13 light hazard. So lots of potential applications when you get into light hazard. A couple that come to mind are assisted care facilities, you know, nursing homes, you know, clubhouses of communities where you might have an attic space that, you know, it could either go as a dry system now, and now you have the option of doing it in an antifreeze as a wet system. So those size limitations up to 200, now up to 500 gallons for NFPA light hazard, for antifreeze kind of really opens up the market for additional application of antifreeze going forward. So a couple advantages of our antifreeze before I wrap up here. So this is Freeze Master, and because it was developed in conjunction with Lubrizol, which is our CPVC vendor, obviously one of the keys was to make it compatible with CPVC piping, which it is. It's also on the FBC compatibility program, which is Lubrizol's third-party run compatibility program. In addition to CPVC, it's compatible with all the piping materials you see here, including galvanized piping, which is one thing that our competition does not have a listing for. So the other listed antifreeze is specifically noted that it's not compatible with galvanized pipe, but Freeze Master is. So any type of piping material that you can think of, we are compatible with for fire sprinkler. The product is only offered through Viking SupplyNet locations. And the three types of, the three sizes we have are 5-gallon pails or buckets. We have 55-gallon drums, and we also have special order 275-gallon totes. And these are all available through your local branches throughout Canada. So just to recap some of the benefits here of what this product is. It is a factory pre-mixed antifreeze, fully UL listed, okay? It's only available through us, and it has this minimum use temperature of -12 or -24 C, which is a little bit colder than the competition. We're talking about, you can use it now, antifreeze up to 500 gallons in NFPA light hazard. We're compatible with all the materials. One of the really nice things, because Lubrizol is a specialty chemical company, they were able to include this corrosion inhibitor package that really offers a nice benefit of controlling potential corrosion in these antifreeze systems. You know, as I've traveled around around North America for a number of years, you hear a lot of stories about, in some areas, antifreeze is seen as this product, or was seen as a product that had this corrosion issue problem. And they were able to include this corrosion inhibitor in the product, and it really cuts down on the amount of corrosion in the piping system when you use Freeze Master. So that's a really nice benefit for those areas that deal with corrosion. The last thing I'll mention here is we did make the decision to dye the product blue, okay? And we did that on purpose, so it's really easy to identify, right? So it's not a clear liquid. And this has really come out as one of the things that, as we're going out talking to the contractors utilizing this product, that is coming really handy, because you can see when the system's fully flushed, when it's filled, you know you have that blue liquid in there. So instead of having to test, you know, a clear liquid, you're able to really see this visually that Freeze Master is installed. So some really nice advantages as a listed antifreeze. One of two on the market, we have a great advantage, some great advantages over the competing product. So as I mentioned, it's available now. It's available only through Viking SupplyNet, and that wraps it up for me. Covered a lot of stuff. Thank Joe for giving me a few extra minutes, but my email and phone are there, and certainly if there's ever any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me or anybody that's at Viking. So I'm going to unshare.
Thank you, Darren, for that great presentation. All right, our last presenter today will be Shaun Kramer. Shaun is Viking's manager for technical support and has been with the Viking Corporation for about 14 years. Shaun is NICET Level 3 certified in both water-based systems layout and special hazards suppression systems. And prior to joining Viking, Shaun was a sprinkler system designer for 7.5 years with 2 sprinkler contractors. Shaun is an alternate on the NFPA 13 Technical Committee for sprinkler discharge criteria as well. Welcome, Shaun.
Thank you, Taylor, and welcome everybody, my neighbors to the north. I'm up here in Michigan, enjoying the last few days here of warmth that we might see until probably June of 2021. What we're going to talk about today is storage sprinkler selection. So when we go through and we have a project with storage, it can get real complicated. It can be quite daunting when you first look at it. There's just so many things that have to be considered when we're looking at a storage protection system. First, we got to start with the commodity classification, which typically is the hardest part to determine what the actual commodity classification is, especially when you get a mixture of different commodities being stored together. Then we have to know the storage arrangement. Is it being stored on open frame racks? Is it palletized? Everything that goes into it for identifying the storage arrangement and how it needs to be protected as well. Well, once we get to the third step, after we've classified our commodity, we've gone through and identified our storage arrangement, now we can go ahead and get into our storage sprinkler selection. However, it doesn't really get that much easier once we get into our sprinkler selection because there's just so many options out there. And one of the nice things is that Viking offers a full line of storage sprinklers for storage protection, from your small 5.6 K factor sprinklers all the way up to our largest K factor of our 28 K factor for an ESFR sprinkler. So what we're going to look at here, we're going to base this upon open frame rack storage. I know there's a lot of different storage arrangements that can apply, but here we're just going to focus on open frame rack storage. We're going to take a look at the control mode density area sprinklers, some of your smaller K factor sprinklers that start out with the smaller storage heights. Then we'll look at control mode specific application sprinklers, your CMSA sprinklers. And lastly, we'll get into early suppression fast response sprinklers once we start to get taller buildings and higher storage heights and still want to have ceiling only protection that's being provided. And then next we'll look at sprinkler selection when it comes to cold storage applications. So anytime we have a non-heated area, cooler or freezer, Viking offers all different sprinklers, CMDA, ESFR, as well as CMSA sprinklers for a full line for cold storage protection as well. So when we look at the smaller K factor sprinklers, our 5, 6, and 8 K sprinklers, they're very commonly used for miscellaneous storage. Because as you can see here, you have a restricted density for those sprinklers as per NFPA. And Factory Mutual doesn't even allow any sprinklers for ceiling only protection that are less than 11.2 K factor. So NFPA 13 does allow them, but they limit the density. So with a 5.6 K factor, you're limited to a 0.2 density, whereas with an 8.0 K factor, you can go up to a 0.34 density. Anything larger than that, you're up into an 11.2 K factor, and it needs to be listed for storage, even for NFPA 13 in that instance. So you can see in the table below, this is for your miscellaneous storage. This is a lot of applications where you might see these 5, 6, and 8K smaller K factor CMDA sprinklers being used. And the reason for the limitation on the densities there, even though, let's say, a 5.6 K factor sprinkler is rated to 175 PSI, and it could protect, a greater density than that, once we get into these high piled storage scenarios, you have these rapidly developing fires that you have to protect against. And as you exceed that density and you get your higher pressures, what happens when the water strikes that deflector is they'll start to get smaller and smaller. And the higher pressure you go to get a higher density out of these small K factors, if you're trying to protect one of these high challenge, rapidly developing fires, these small water droplets might not be able to penetrate the fire plume, and they'll just be pushed away and not be able to control the fire. So that's why we see this limitation in density here on these smaller K factor sprinklers. Factory Mutual doesn't call it miscellaneous storage like NFPA does, but Factory Mutual refers to it as low piled storage. So with low piled storage, it's very similar for Factory Mutual as per NFPA. It's still looking at the occupancy hazards. So on the table on the previous slide, we saw ordinary hazard, extra hazard based upon the miscellaneous. Now when we get into the low piled storage, on the table to the right, you can see you have your HC1, HC2, and HC3, which is the way that Factory Mutual identifies hazard classifications. Once we start to get a little bit higher in storage, get out of that miscellaneous storage or that low piled storage, now we can start looking at some of the larger K factor control mode density area sprinklers. And a good rule of thumb when using these types of sprinklers, if you want ceiling only protection and want to stay away from in-rack sprinklers, your cap's usually right around 25-foot storage. So when you look at that, you can look at some scenarios where you might be able to go higher, some where you might not be able to go as high as you get into the higher commodity classifications. But it's a good rule of thumb to keep in mind for these controllable density area sprinklers. So for this example, we have the VK530, which is 11.2 K factor, and then the VK580, which is a 16.8 K factor. And currently what they'll use is, as you can see on the right, your ceiling density area curves. One thing coming up in the 2022 edition of NFPA 13 is single point density. It's looking to go that way. It's almost been passed through, where you don't have the curves anymore. And for all these storage applications, you're going to have a single density, kind of like what's shown in our tables here for the 530 and 580. You'll be right there with, say, a 0.5 density or 0.7 density. Instead of using the curve to determine your remote area and the density, it's going to be supplied to you right in a single point. Once we get a little bit higher in certain situations, we can see here, in this case, we're only over 22 feet and up to including 25 feet in this case. And we're already looking at some in-rack sprinkler applications. However, the CMDA sprinklers that we just looked at, whether it's a 5.6, an 8.0 K factor, or an 11.2 K factor, they can all be used for in-rack applications. So once you start to get into in-rack application, you can have your ceiling only sprinklers up at the deck, and then you'll have your in-rack sprinklers protecting down throughout whatever levels are needed. When we look at the open frame rack storage, that's why we have our flue spaces. One, so the fire can travel up and activate the sprinklers when we have our ceiling only protection, but also with your longitudinal and transverse flue spaces, those are common places where you can see your in-rack sprinklers being required to be located at multiple levels based upon what's being protected. When we start to get into the control mode specific application sprinklers, one thing we'll see a little bit different here that you can see in the table below, table 22.4 out of NFPA 13, is now instead of a specific density over a specific remote area size, now we have a number of design sprinklers. So in this case, we can see for the wet systems, it's 15 at 25 PSI, or for the dry systems, it's 25 at 25 PSI, because we have that increased requirement for a dry sprinkler system. But once we move into CMSA sprinklers, now we're looking at a number of sprinklers at a specified pressure. The one we have shown here is the VK540. Some of you might remember this one as the large drop sprinkler. It was referred to that in many editions of NFPA 13. Currently, it would be referred to as a 11.2 K factor CMSA sprinkler. Another CMSA storage sprinkler that we offer would be the VK592. This is a 19.6 K factor pendant. And copied in the table in front of you, you can see, once again, it's a number of sprinkler design, 15 in this case, with a specific operating pressure. The information for the sprinkler can be found either in NFPA or on the technical data sheet. Now, one of the nice things about the sprinkler is it's an alternative to some of your smaller K-factor ESFR sprinklers. So when we look at ESFR sprinklers, we have very stringent obstruction rules that we have to follow. One of the most stringent is that anytime you have a bar joist, you have to be at least 1 foot minimum off the bottom chord of that bar joist. And with your bar joist being spaced out 5 feet apart in most common applications, sometimes it can be difficult when you have other obstructions to get that 1 foot consistently off of the bar joist. So the VK592 allows you to be within 4 inches of the bottom of the bar joist, or obstruction for this case, for that matter. So instead of being 1 foot away, now we can move it to 4 inches away. Another advantage of the 592 over an ESFR sprinkler would be for obstructed construction. NFPA 13 specifically states that in obstructed construction with ESFR sprinklers, that you're required to install an ESFR sprinkler up in every bay of that protection. Well, with the VK592, it allows you to install them, especially with concrete tees, down to a certain depth and not have to install a sprinkler in every single bay. So based upon your layout, if you have a large parking structure, say with concrete tees that are being used in that situation, and you're able to skip every other bay because you don't have to install them in every single bay like you would with ESFR sprinklers, that's a significant advantage for using the VK592. As you can see in the table on the bottom there, it does start to become restricted at certain points. Anytime you exceed 40 feet ceiling height, it would not be an option. And its sweet spot for hydraulic advantage is right around 30 to 35 feet. So it can be used up to 40 feet if you need it for those obstruction rules. But most of the time, if you have a 40-foot situation, you're going to be looking at one of the ESFRs that we offer. Talking about the ESFR sprinklers, the early suppression fast response, these are similar to the CMSA sprinklers, as it's always going to be a number of sprinklers designed over a certain pressure. And we start out with our lower K factor ESFR sprinklers for the lower ceiling heights. So in this case, we're looking at up to 30-foot storage to start out with our smaller K factors. You have your VK500, which is a 14.0 K factor, and your VK503, which is a 16.8 K factor. So both of them you can see in the tables with 35-foot storage, 35-foot ceiling height and 30-foot storage, they require the same amount of flow for the most part, 1455 for the VK500 and 1454 for the VK503. So really what that comes down to as to which one you're going to select would be based upon your water supply and whatever your pressure available is. If you need to reduce the pressure in order to meet your calculations for the system, then you'd probably be looking at the VK503 in that instance. If you have plenty of pressure and it's not a concern, you might opt for the VK500 in that situation. You'll also see with the VK503 that it allows up to a 40-foot ceiling height with 30-foot storage, with the same flow that you saw for it with the 35-foot ceiling height with 30-foot storage. So that's about the sweet spot for these 2K factor sprinklers are for the 14K and the 16.8K, but we can also see with the 16.8K up to the 35-foot storage using the 40-foot ceiling height. So now we can even increase the storage height a little bit more and still remain at that same flow up to 35-foot storage with a 40-foot ceiling height using the 16.8 K factor. As we start to get higher now we're going to get into our larger K factor sprinklers. So in this case, we're looking at storage up to 40 feet. Now we're looking at the VK506, which is a 22.4 K factor, and the VK510, which is a 25.2 K factor. And you'll notice on the tables, I point out that they both require 40 PSI. So if you have a 45-foot ceiling height and you have 40-foot storage, you can see that the VK510, the 25K, requires 1,913 GPM, where the 22.4 K factor only requires 1,701 GPM. And that's because it's a smaller K factor and they both require the same pressure. So in most instances, when you have this type of scenario with a 45-foot ceiling and 40-foot storage height, you're most likely going to be looking towards the 22.4 K factor because it requires less of a flow. Now, once we start to get above our 40-foot storage height, now we're looking at 43-foot storage height with a 48-foot ceiling height. And this is where the VK514 comes in as per NFPA 13 for the 28K factor. And now you can store up to a 43-foot ceiling height with a requirement of 1,988 GPM. However, if you look across the board on this table, you'll see even at 25-foot ceiling height with 20-foot storage, excuse me, you would require 1,988 GPM. And that's because the sprinkler specifically listed at one pressure to cover those higher ceiling heights per its UL listing. So based upon the UL listing, Typically, you're going to be looking at like a 22 or a 25 K factor if you have less than that 48-foot ceiling height. But anytime you do exceed it, you would be looking at the VK514 as a possible option. You also notice that I pointed out the section in NFPA 13 that talks about equivalency. Now, one of the things about the 514 is that it's an FM approved sprinkler. However, you can still use it as per NFPA 13 based upon the FM approval criteria, based upon this section where it states that nothing in the standard is intended to prevent the use of systems, methods, or devices of equivalent or superior quality, strength, fire resistance, effectiveness, durability, and safety over those prescribed by the standard. In this case, the VK514 would meet those requirements. Now, when we start to look at the VK514, as per the FM data sheets, there was a significant change made in July of 2020 this year. These tables that I have shown here are from January of 2020 to July of 2020. And what you'll see in the table above, table 8 is the one I used for example, but if you look at tables 2 through 11, most of them used to allow for a 45-foot maximum ceiling height. But now if you look at the July 2020 table on the bottom, it's limited to a 40-foot ceiling height. So now anytime you exceed a 40-foot ceiling height, you're up into what's called table 17B, which we'll look at on the next slide. Whereas before you could use tables 2 through 11 with your different design options up to a 45-foot ceiling height. You also notice in the bottom table, there's a lot of green highlights with a lot of changes going on. One of the other things Factory Mutual did is they went away from your standard 12 sprinkler design. As you can see in the upper one, 12 or greater in that case. And a lot of the designs now have 9 or 10 sprinklers in tables 2 through 11. So you have different options that can be applied. And if you want to talk about that more, I'd be happy to discuss the Factory Mutual changes with you, but we just don't have time to cover all that right now at this point in time. So when I was talking about table 17B, now Factory Mutual kicks you up into table 17B, which is going to be for your ceiling height of 50 feet or 55 feet. But now anytime you exceed 40, you're automatically going up to this 50-foot maximum ceiling height. And this is where the VK514 works out very nicely. Because if you look at the 28K factor that I highlighted there on table 17B, you can see the design is 10 sprinklers at 40 PSI. However, there's an asterisk next to the 28. If we go down to the footnote, it says the design of 10 automatic sprinklers at 40 PSI can be reduced to 9 automatic sprinklers at 40 PSI when the water supply can also provide a minimum pressure of 80 PSI for the most remote 4 sprinklers, 2 sprinklers on 2 lines flowing. And if you performed hydraulic calculations for storage applications, you can pretty much see that anytime you're able to meet that 80 PSI with 4 sprinklers flowing, you're almost always going to be able to meet that and to be able to reduce down to the 9 sprinkler design area. So now we can do a 9 sprinkler at 40 PSI, giving us a flow of 1,593 GPM. Once again, this applies to all of the storage heights over 40 feet because it kicks you up into this table now as per July of 2020. Another thing you'll see on the left-hand side, the storage arrangement, one thing you'll see missing there is multiple row racks. It talks about single and double row racks. So for a few months there, it looked like in Factory Mutual, anytime you exceeded a 40-foot storage height, you were going to have to move away from multiple row racks. However, if you go on their datasheet website right now, just last week for their November update of their FM 8-9 datasheet, now this table in table 17B includes multiple row racks as well. So you have your single, double, and multiple row racks anytime you're using the VK514 28.0 K factor sprinkler. Also, if you have storage up to 50 feet, the VK514 would still be a possible option. We're looking at 9 sprinklers at 80 PSI in this situation, for an overall flow of 2,253 gallons per minute. So kind of covering our ESFR sprinklers, we look at the 500 up to 30 feet. We have 40 feet for the 22K, our 28K up to a 50 feet or 55 feet in some scenarios. The 25 is up to 45 feet, and the 503 is up to 35. Now, they do go a little bit higher than that in some situations. I'm just talking about hydraulically, where you get the best advantage out of them is based upon those heights. But what happens if our storage is over 50 feet? Do we still have an option for ceiling only protection? The answer is no, not at this time. If your storage is over 50 feet, you don't have an option for ceiling only protection. However, Factory Mutual did some research in a test program from 2011 to 2015, and it's been in Factory Mutual 8-9 for quite some time now, because we're seeing a lot of taller warehouses going 80 feet, 100 feet in certain situations. So we have to have a way to be able to protect them properly. So Factory Mutual did research and came out with that we can use ESFR sprinklers as in-rack sprinklers now. And the nice thing about it is you don't have to balance the ceiling sprinklers with the rack sprinklers. They're independent designs. So for example, if we had an 80-foot building and let's say we were using the 22 K factor ESFR, well, we design it based upon a 40-foot ceiling height up at the ceiling, and then 40 feet lower, we would have one row of in-rack ESFR sprinklers of the same K factor of the 22K to protect the next 40 feet down to the floor. So instead of an 80-foot building with the traditional in-rack sprinklers where you would have multiple levels of in-racks all throughout the racks trying to protect that with the in-rack sprinklers, now you have the option to have one level at the ceiling and one level halfway down to protect below. It's the same design that you would use for a standard ESFR design. So your typical spacing is 30 to 40 feet. It requires 14.0 K factor and larger, which is no longer a concern because no ESFRs are made that are smaller than 14K anymore. And once again, you have no balancing of the ceiling and the in-rack sprinklers. Also in the 2019 edition of NFPA 13, this same criteria was added as well. So based upon FM 8-9 and the current edition of NFPA 13, ESFR in-racks are a possibility. We did just launch a guard just a little while ago here for our ESFR sprinklers. So if you ever come across that situation and you need a design, we'll be happy to help you, assist you with that. Looking at our cold storage sprinklers, getting into that, we have the same options. I'm not going to go through the whole density thing here again, but we have our 5, 6, and 8K factor dry sprinklers that can be used up to a specific density. Now remember, for Factory Mutual, you can't use the 5, 6, or 8K for ceiling only protection for high pile storage, whether it's cold storage or a heated area. And when we look at the 5, 6, and the 8K sprinklers, we have a few different options available. If you look on the right-hand side, that's one of our newer dry sprinklers. It's a dry flush sprinkler, and it's real commonly used in cooler and freezer applications because you can recess that element up above the escutcheon, and you don't have to worry about possibly having something hang down and hit it with product while it's being loaded and unloaded out of the cooler or freezer application. So as you can see with the 5, 6, and the 8Ks, there's quite a few different options for your sprinkler selection. Once you start to get a little bit higher in storage, and now this is where Factory Mutual comes in as well, because FM doesn't allow less than an 11.2 K factor. So once we get to the higher box-in-a-box applications, we can start looking at the 11.2 K dry sprinklers. They're quick response and standard response. And as I was talking about before, in a lot of situations, these will allow for up to 25-foot storage height without requiring in-racks. So when you have a box in a box, which means that you have a heated area above it where you can run a wet system and then just connect with your dry sprinklers to drop down below, you have that possibility with the 11.2 K factor dry sprinklers. And this table here just kind of shows you there's a lot of different commodities and a lot of different ceiling heights with a lot of different storage arrangements, where the 11.2 K factor ELO dry pendant, it actually requires the least overall water demand at those ceiling heights. So there's a lot of applications where that could be applied. However, once we get a little bit higher now in our cold storage applications, now we're looking at our ESFR dry sprinklers. So 14 and our 17K ESFR dries are available as dry sprinklers. Still, since they're ESFRs, they're wet systems only, but they allow for the same design criteria that you would have with a standard 14 or 17K ESFR sprinkler. And your calculation would be the exact same way, your 4 sprinklers on the most 3 remote branch lines as per NFPA 13, and in most situations for factory mutual. So when we look at a system material comparison with the ESFR dries, if you had a double interlock pre-action system, this is what you're looking at. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of maintenance requirements you have to worry about with your air supply, detection, low point drains, and you got your crawl space piping, you got your in racks, you got your ceiling protection inside the freezer. Well, just by switching to the ESFR dry with that heated crawl space above, you can see a lot of that's being reduced. We don't have any of those additional requirements because we don't have a double interlock pre-action system. We don't have the in-rack piping. We don't have any piping ran throughout the inside of the cooler, because now we're just connecting in the heated area above and dropping down with our ESFR dries to protect the cooler freezer application. The last sprinkler we're going to look at is a CMSA upright sprinkler. This CMSA upright sprinkler can be used for double interlock pre-action systems. So system that a lot of people have heard about is a quell system that allows you for up to a class 3 commodity and a certain storage height to do ceiling only protection using a system that has dry piping until the system activates. Well, the VK598 allows for that as well. It allows for up to a 45-foot ceiling height with 40-foot storage, using a double interlock pre-action system up to a class 3 commodity. So we can see here in these applications, it can be used in certain situations where it's not a cold storage application. However, where we see it most commonly used and where the sweet spot really is for the sprinkler would be in your freezer and cooler applications up to a class 3 commodity to help you avoid requiring in-racks. So when I was talking about the dry sprinklers earlier, I was talking about a box-in-a-box application. Well, the VK598 comes in now where you don't have that box-in-a-box and your cooler freezer walls go all the way up to the deck. So now you need to install a sprinkler at the ceiling inside the area that's being protected. So we can see here with the VK598, all the information is going to be found right on the data sheet based upon the table that we're looking at. And you'll see that it requires a water delivery time. In order to get that ceiling only protection so high with a double interlock pre-action system, you have to be able to prove that you can get the water there in a certain specific amount of time. So in certain cases, you might have a 20-second water delivery time, or a 25-second, or a 40-second. Now, one of the things that we offer as support for the VK598 sprinkler is we'll run these water delivery calculations for you in our technical service department to help you see if you would be able to meet these required water delivery times when you're looking at using the VK598 sprinkler. So all the information is going to be on the data sheet for the applicable sprinkler. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, feel free to give our technical service line a call, or you can visit our website anytime. We'll be happy to assist you. And at this point in time, I will turn it back over to Taylor.
Thanks, Shaun. That was a great presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Scott Tanner. I am the National Sales Manager for Viking SupplyNet. Viking SupplyNet, of course, is the distribution arm of the Viking Group. We have 3 strategically located centers, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and along with our authorized Viking distributor, SCS Canada, working out of Quebec, we can service the Atlantic through to the Pacific and north as far up to the territories. Aside from the Viking manufactured product lines, we also carry a full line of high quality products to suit almost any full project supply. So just to wrap today up, I wanted to say we appreciate your time, your interest, your support of the Viking products, our associated business partners. And in the coming days, I'll be sending an individual thanks to each attendee, including my own personal contact, as well as the contact information for your regional Viking sales representative. Again, just wanted to say thank you very much for your support. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend and look forward to getting out on the street and seeing you all in person again. Take care. Stay safe.